So, welcome to Talk to Me, language tools to gain customers and improve service. How many in here are bi or multilingual? Excellent. What language?
Spanish, English, and a little German and a little
And a little what?
ASL.
Excellent. Fantastic. I speak several languages, none that are useful really anywhere, including Norwegian, German, and some really terrible Russian. I mean, they're useful in their countries, but not so much. Actually, Norwegian, you can go with just English too. So, any case. So, here's kind of what we're going to run through today. I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction. What is language access? How many have heard the term language access? We're going to talk about local languages in Kansas City. Why does language access matter? Then we're going to talk about some tools and resources, how to create a language access program, and then we'll wrap it up. So, to start off with, I have been born and raised here in Kansas City, but I spent a lot of my adult life living up in Alaska, of all places. And I got involved in politics, and in my last stint, I worked for the mayor in Anchorage. And during that time, I was tasked with creating a language access program for the city offices for each department so that they could be able to serve folks that are English emergent speakers. You might be surprised to know that Anchorage, Alaska they just put out the new number, 112 languages in their schools. Surprising, isn't it? So a really fascinating place to learn about language access and how it works and the rules that are associated with it, because there are actually federal laws that go with it. I came across, when I was working on language access, it was one of those things that once you see it done poorly and you see it done well, you never see it the same again. And this will now happen to you, you're welcome, when you leave here. Anytime you are out at some place where somebody does not speak English well yet, and somebody is telling them to go get an interpreter or passing things back and forth or saying, I can't help you, you will never feel okay about it ever again. Because of that, when I moved back to Kansas City and seeing a real void in Kansas City of language access services, I decided that it was time for me to launch into my own business to help organizations understand how to do it, understand why it's important, and the ability for them to be able to connect better with their customers, their clients, or in cases of nonprofits, people that they serve. The moment that you see someone hear their own language, their face literally lights up. Hence how I came up with the name Lighting Up Language. So language access means, come on in, you're good. Means providing people meaningful access to language services who prefer a language other than English. And most often we're looking at interpretation or translation in order for them to be able to do business with an agency. So this meaningful access, meaningful is this word throughout the federal government that they use to think about, are you providing this resource in a timely manner, in an accurate fashion? Is it effective? And is it free? So this free thing, this means that you can't charge people for things that are being translated or for getting an interpreter. That it plays especially into any agency that receives federal funding. But I want you to keep in mind, if by chance your business were to get a contract with the federal government, with a local government, a state government, that actually then applies to you if you're in contact with the public. So language services. I'm certain you've heard the term translation, interpretation. Besides my sister or my niece, who can tell me the difference between interpretation and translation? Yes, ma'am.
interpretation has a little bit of a cultural component built in, so that nuances of language are then translated more correctly.
Great. Did I see another hand?
Yeah, basically the same thing. Translation is like the actual live communication of a language in another language, but then interpretation is sort of reading or conversation, the context behind what it means.
Right, so can you guys not hear? Oh, you're waving, sorry. So you're picking up a lot on the nuance of what is underneath the actual words. I'm going to even make this easier for you. Translation is written words. Interpretation is spoken, right? Both of them, understanding a language, understanding the nuance, understanding idioms is crucially important when you are trying to change something into a different language. This is why it's really important for people who are serving, in particular as paid interpreters or translators, have had their abilities assessed so that they've been tested to make certain that they actually speak that language well or can write that language well. Do you guys care if I close this a little bit? It might happen all the way, I don't know yet. I can't stress enough how important this is, that somebody who tells you they speak another language, just because they tell you that they do, doesn't mean they should serve as an interpreter or a translator. And I have been victim of that. When I say victim, I think I was actually the predator. That's a terrible word. But I had been asked to serve as an interpreter for 3 small Russian children up in Alaska who had been adopted. And they were out of this one really small little school outside of Fairbanks, like 1 class per grade. And it was like, I had just come back from Russia. I'm like, oh, my Russian isn't great. But it's okay because the kids don't speak English, so they can't tell anybody how bad my English is. And nobody else in the school speaks Russian, so they don't know how bad my Russian is. So, fortunately, these were elementary school kids, which was about where my language ability was. But I did a disservice to those kids and to those teachers because there were pieces that I didn't know. So, just because someone says they can speak a language doesn't mean they should serve in these types of capacities. Likewise, you want to make certain that they understand confidentiality and processes of serving as an interpreter. Doing translation, even more highly skilled than being I shouldn't say that, even being a translator, especially if you start looking at you're translating legal documents, medical documents, literature, you really want to make certain that somebody has a grasp on those components. Okay, multilingual customer support. I'm certain that you all have called a phone number that said press 2 for Spanish, those types of situations. A lot more of that is now happening, of course, with email and text. Multilingual marketing, creating your ads and social media so that people who speak these other languages, it catches their eye and they can see that you're interested in who they are as a person. Okay, so this is where I think it gets fun. So here are, besides English, your top 5 languages in the Kansas City area that are spoken. Spanish, Chinese, Arabic, Vietnamese, and German. Isn't that crazy, this little German hanging out here at the end? This is a lot of leftover German immigrants that continue to speak German in their houses. So what this says to me is that if you were looking at getting something translated, or you had a situation where you needed an interpreter, most likely you're going to look at Spanish. Second, you would look at Chinese, and so on down the line. The most important component of this diagram, of this graph, is that you want to know who speaks English less than very well. So you can see 51,000 people speak it less than very well. But in German, you only have 973 people that speak it less than very well. So what this says to me is unless you are targeting a German community specifically, I wouldn't spend money in this area. I would look into what the next language would be. But you also have to keep in mind what's happening in the global perspective that's changing these numbers, because these are coming from the US Census, which in 2020 was not an amazing US Census. And since then, we've had a number of Afghani immigrants, Ukrainian immigrants, and you will be surprised to know that in Kansas City, we've got about 15,000 Haitian Creole speakers. I was shocked to find this out. So you want to make certain that when you're thinking about which language, you want to use the biggest bang for your buck. GEWKC is an adult education school here in Kansas City, and they teach GED classes, but they also do English language classes. This is where I find it really interesting when I think about getting things translated. So, in the fall enrollment, they have had 665 Spanish speakers that have been enrolled. You can see there with the Haitian Creole that you're at 158. And then on down the line. Who knows where Pular is spoken? Who's ever heard of Pular? I know, nobody had either. It's actually this area right in here. It's a Western African language. So different groups will end up coming, and then more people come to join them, and it starts building these numbers. Pular, I know, is starting to be seen out in some of the suburban schools as well. So we want to make certain that our schools understand cultural components of Pular while they're trying to get kids into school and helping them acclimate. So why does it matter? Globalization. Businesses are increasingly serving diverse global customer base. It's really amazing if you are on any social media and you can find things that are made anywhere across the globe. It used to kind of be like, okay, well, how long is this going to take to get? Is there customs? Is there anything? All of that's becoming much simpler, and people are purchasing from wherever they need to. The demographic shifts. Again, speaking about like the Afghanis that came over and the Haitian Creole speakers. Just keeping in mind what's happening. Your customers are getting to the point where they want to be catered to in their own language. They want to make certain that they know what they're getting and how they can get it. Local market penetration. So localization, this is again looking back at who is here. If this is your target audience, if you're wanting to sell a product just here in Kansas City, who is here that you would want to connect with? And of course, we have a global reach. Again, back to people being able to get things off of the internet across the globe. How many of you are looking at doing something for World Cup? So this is where both of those meet, between your localization and your global reach. Because we're going to end up having people here from across the globe, but we also have got communities here that often come from those areas where we're going to have teams coming from. So imagine the impact that you would have when you are catering both to understanding who is here in Kansas City and who is coming for the World Cup, and how those speakers cross over. How can you make things or appeal to both of those audiences? Again, when people know that they can understand you, you're going to build trust and loyalty. When they see that you are personalizing your products to what they have, they're going to be more, or what they're looking for, they're going to be more interested in it. I found this was really interesting. So Disney Frozen, who's seen it? Yeah. Who's seen it more than once? Mm-hmm. And who can sing the Frozen song? Yeah. So its success was partly due because they had a multilingual strategy included in the production of this film. It was translated into 42 languages and Let It Go was translated into 25 different languages. You don't have to do that much. I don't know if anybody has Disney's budget, but again, it'll help you to stand out in the market. Certainly a lot of people when the World Cup comes here are going to be looking to connect with consumers. So how can you make certain that they feel a bit of home in this moment that they're here, but also reaches into their excitement of being here for the World Cup? Boosting your conversion rates, so your clear communication will help make those transactions easier, especially if you're doing something that's more like a wholesale type of situation and you're sending, a larger amount of products to someplace. That will help you to build again that loyalty and trust. And again, that localized content. I just can't stress that enough of how important it is to make certain that we get things right, and that we're translating into specific dialects if that's where we need to target. If you can imagine, Arabic goes from the Middle East all the way over the north of Africa to Morocco. Those dialects are very different, and the cultural nuances with them are very different. So if you're trying to target one, you just want to try and do your due diligence to make certain you're getting the right wording and nuance with it. Again, when people know that you care about what language they speak, they will keep coming back to you. It is an amazing way to build those relationships and build those connections. Okay, so here is where it all becomes legal. Does anybody have a contract with a city, state, local, federal government? Excellent. Oh, you do have one. Does anybody have a contract with a nonprofit? So, federal law says, because of the U.S. Civil Rights Act of 1964, prohibits discrimination based on race, color, and national origin in programs that receive federal funding. National origin was identified as language, that you cannot separate national origin and language. So, in 2000, Executive Order 13166 said that any agency that receives federal funding must make certain that they are providing meaningful access to language services. Where this gets really interesting, like I said, is so any agency that is government, any organization that gets government funds and continues to pass through, at the end of the day, if you start really digging, it could be just about anybody that really should be providing access to language services. For those of you who have ever witnessed somebody at, in particular, a government building that is not receiving language access services, they need to file a complaint so that that can stop. They are for everyone, the language access is, and they must be provided free of charge, regardless of citizenship status. When I was up in Anchorage, we had a situation where a man had come in to the municipal attorney's office, and they were passing papers back and forth. They didn't know what was happening. He was there for about an hour. He left, came back in another hour. They called me down to figure out what was going on with this. We got an interpreter on the phone, and within the next 13 minutes, what we fully understood was happening was his car had been towed. It was at the impound lot. He didn't have the money to get it out, but he just wanted to get his stuff out of the car. So in this situation, the city failed him because they weren't providing language access services to him. The tow yard that is contracted with the city to provide an impound lot, let him down because they weren't offering it. So now it has taken up 2.5, 3 hours of this man's time, as well as the employees at both places, rather than if they would have gotten an interpreter straight on the phone. Okay. Who has ever used an interpreter or a translator before? Excellent. Do you remember, did you pay them? Nope. Did you pay them? Kids.
Sometimes.
Yeah, right, yeah. So just so you have kind of an idea of what you're looking at if you were needing an interpreter. First of all, paid interpreters are again going to have had their language abilities assessed and they should have been trained on how to serve as an interpreter. Typically, it happens over the phone, happens in person, or it happens via video. And then I've gone ahead and put kind of the estimated cost of what you're seeing so that you have an idea of what that would be. The other situation with interpreters, again being spoken, is that not often, but sometimes you will see at larger conferences that you've got people that have got interpreters in like the back of the room. That is called simultaneous interpretation. So it's amazing to me, their brains, that what they're hearing, they are automatically changing and it's coming out their mouth and people are hearing it in a headset. The other type of interpretation is consecutive. So I speak, the interpreter speaks to tell the other person, the person speaks, the interpreter speaks, I get it back. So always understand your time constraints, because if you have a consecutive, then it's going to take twice as long, right? Because everything needs to be said. The other issue that I really want to stress with interpretation is a lot of times people will just bring somebody with them to a place or be told to bring somebody with them. That person who they bring with them will always be on their side. So if you ever have an issue that there's been a problem or whatever, you just have to understand that this interpreter that they brought with them is not going to be completely benign in this situation. They're going to help them out. Secondly, even though typically with most businesses it's not the situation, kids should never, ever, ever be used as interpreters. We don't want to put kids in these situations to do this when they might not get it right. And that is a scary place for those kids to be. And it also completely shifts the power dynamics that the kid now has all of the power that's out there. Okay, so translators. Again, people who are translators are highly trained to understand the written nuance. Most of the time you're just doing this through like an email source to connect with them. And then you're looking at typically 13 cents to $5 a word. Depends on the language. Your 13 cents is going to be Spanish typically. Some of your easier to find languages that have translators. $5 a word. Up in Alaska, where there are Alaska Native languages, getting an interpreter for GEWKC is you're looking at $5 a word. And it also is because of the way that some languages are set up where they have a root in the middle and then they start adding things onto the ends. And so what's one word is really almost like a whole sentence for us. So due to the fact as well that indigenous languages have suffered such a severe blow over the last 200 years, the amount of people that have this skill is very small. But I tell you what, you get something printed in an indigenous language, and for my friends at the back table from Shawnee Mission, those of you in particular with soccer that are looking at doing things around the World Cup, thinking about indigenous languages that are coming out of South and Central American countries is something that I have a feeling would get you big points. Okay, here's why I like using local providers and humans. First, you can hire locally. We've got several places here in Kansas City. Jewish Vocational Services, which is a refugee resettlement agency, has an interpretation and translation center where they hire folks that they've helped to resettle to serve in these capacities. Bridging the Gap is an additional one. Propio is actually a very large company, but it's actually based in Overland Park. So there's a number of organizations in Kansas City that use it. The benefits with hiring a human to do these things as opposed to machines. so you can hire locally. Humans understand the nuance better. It helps to build connection within our own city. The challenges are it costs more to hire a human, and it takes a little bit more time as well, like I said, the way that the process has to go. You may not always have languages available. One of the languages we're really struggling with in the Kansas City area right now is Rohingya. You heard of Rohingya? And we'll continue to find that as people continue to be displaced. You also have small communities. Can you think of any reason why it would be hard, why it might be a struggle in a small community, let's say of our Pular community? If you bring in an interpreter who is a Pular interpreter and you've got a situation. Okay, I'll make it easy. Yes, thank you.
I would say that, one, they might also have a different job, but two, they may have a tighter connection with that smaller community, making it more hard for them to be
Unbiased.
unbiased,
Yeah.
impartial. That's the word.
Yeah.
Whereas like words.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's right, it's also, imagine you just come into some place and you can't pay your bill, right?
Yeah.
So they call in the interpreter who is your sister's aunt's cousin, right? And now all of a sudden everybody's knowing your business, right? So. Okay, who has used any type of Google Translate? Have you enjoyed that experience? No. Tell me why. Tell me why not.
It can, in terms of, I've found that in terms of having the correct syntax and in terms of just basic translation. So for me, Italian, it comes out completely wrong, and it doesn't pick up on, like you said, idioms, metaphors, etc. So you get sort of a really rough translation that if you said it to an Italian person, I'm a professor back in school, she would look at me like I was insane.
Yeah.
So I don't go for Google Translate at all.
So Google Translate is what we call machine translation. Basically, a bunch of words have been put into their language model, and then when you put in English words, it's going to find the one that corresponds with it, and it's going to check it out. AI translation has taken that to a different realm where it is learning how all of those words are being used together. The great things about it, it's quick, right? You can do a lot of things for free or for cheap. The consistency, for the most part, you kind of know with your Google Translate that you're not going to necessarily get what you really want. But the consistency is getting better, in particular with the AI translation, just because of how scary and weird AI is. Accessibility and inclusivity, it's quick, easy to access so that people can be included. Real-time translation, again, you're enhancing a global business perspective. It enriches entertainment. In France, in Paris, there is like an opera hall that they've got these glasses that can go on like over the top of your own glasses. And right at the top, it'll have subtitles in there so you can still see what's happening on the stage, but you have the subtitles in there as well. I'm having conversations with Starlight. I'd love for them to get that. It assists with healthcare and supporting education. Again, quick, easy access to get to. Okay, so let's talk about the differences between the two of them though. Again, if you are looking at a complex, high-risk translation, you are going to go towards AI, but you will always want to make certain that you have a human that comes back through and reads it. And a person who does linguistic quality assurance. Anytime you are paying to have something translated, there are always two people that are going through that translation, which is why it's not also really quick, because they want to make certain that they're both getting the same information. So, for medium risk translations, do the AI, use a human, always be on the safer side. If you've got a human who can go through it, I would do it. And then non-critical, you can do machine translation with AI powered and somebody to look at it. There just is really no situation where you, especially if it is your brand, that I would put anything out there without having a human who speaks this language look it over. Okay, so I found some fun, because this is things that I do for fun. A friend of mine posted this on Facebook a couple of days ago. So I pulled it out. There's hundreds of different translation apps that are out there. So, straight from Facebook, in these blessed moments, Allah has blessed us with His Son Muhammad, the last of the cluster. What is the cluster? May Allah protect and bless him. O Allah, praise be to you, as many as your creatures, for your satisfaction and the adornment of your throne and the extension of your words for every blessing you have bestowed upon us. I'm like, I don't know what that says. So I pulled it from here. So Facebook is actually not using Google Translate. They actually have a different program that they use. Pulled it into Google Translate. You can see there's some of it that is very similar, but this last cluster, the last of the bunch, which makes me laugh because thinking of like Muhammad and Allah, I don't ever think of the last of the bunch, right? Okay, so Quillbot is one that I found that I actually feel pretty good about. So in these blessed moments, God has blessed us with a son, Muhammad. Again, they still use bunch. The youngest of the bunch, may God protect and bless him. O Allah, all praise is due to you, equal to the number of your creation, the pleasure of yourself, the weight of your throne, and the ink of your words for every blessing you have bestowed upon us. What I like about Quillbot is that it's got some different modes that can be used for what you're trying to target. So when I took it from standard to fluency, it goes, in these wonderful moments, God has blessed us with the son, the youngest in the family. May God protect and bless him. O Allah, all the praise is due to you in proportion to the quantity of your creations, your pleasure, the weight of your throne, and the ink in your verses for every favor you have bestowed upon us. So it's really interesting to just kind of see how these machines are reworking this to get it to what feels most comfortable for you. Again, we would always have a human that would look over this. Okay, here's some things you can use. There is an app that's called Tarjimli, and it means home in Arabic. It was an app that was created for and by refugees, realizing that a lot of people just didn't have access to get an interpreter. The thing that I really want to stress with this is that this is a great app to have at that moment when you see somebody needing an interpreter and there is no one around and whoever they're speaking with is not helping. It is a nonprofit. Again, it can be used for free. Please don't use it for free for your business. You can also pay $25 a month and get free interpretation for the whole month. It is a live person that gets on the other end of that. It can be video, and it can also just be phone, so you can just do it on your phone. $25 a month, you can use it for way more than that, or give donations, and it's a business write-off as well. If you were to find that you really need a lot of interpretation or translation services, I would work directly with a company to try and get a contract set up so you can get a quote and kind of know what you would be paying. Recently, I've been doing some focus groups with some immigrants and refugees here in Kansas City. And so I wanted to try out some of these live translation recordings. So I tried out TurboScribe and Nada. TurboScribe has more languages, between 98 to 130, depending on which language it is, they'll tell you how much they can actually do with it. What was really cool with TurboScribe was that you could, since I don't speak Spanish, while we were having these focus groups, I had the computer set up and just had it recording, and it was translating as we went through the questions. So I could see what the answers were, so I didn't need an interpreter there to tell me what was going on, that we could just follow along. For the most part, pretty good. It gave me a better idea than if I wouldn't have had it of what was going on. Sometimes you're like, wait, what's happening? But I think that it's also a situation of how close is the microphone to it, how well is somebody speaking, and so forth. Nada, which I used this one for Haitian Creole, their translation, you can't see it simultaneously, but what the product was that was coming out on the other end, I actually preferred to what I saw from TurboScribe. Again, there are so many of these different platforms that are now coming out. It's going to be really amazing to see how this continues to grow. It will continue to get better, for certain. So, how to create a language access program. If you wanted to instill in your business, in your organization, making certain that you have policies and procedures that all staff would know how to provide people with languages, here's how you're going to go. And I also left these on the table. This is also a quick cheat sheet for you. But so you want to really assess how your organization, your business does connect with the public. You want to find out what languages they're speaking. You want to figure out how do you connect with them. Is it on the phone? Is it through the internet? Is it someplace where they're coming in? Because that's going to adjust your strategy for how you connect. You want to research and connect with members of target communities to understand their cultures and purchasing preferences. I can't stress this enough, how important these connections are, of people being humans, not just customers, and especially where I feel like we're about to go here in the next few years. Building these connections will build your business, and these communities will stick by the people who have shown up for them. You want to make certain you partner with professionals. Again, your professional interpreters and translators. Hire multilingual staff and have them trained so that they can serve in this role. And learn another language yourself, which is always fun. Even small amounts. When someone comes to visit from someplace else and you can say hello or thank you in their language, makes them super excited. I think of this in particular with World Cup coming and that Americans are notoriously monolingual, having that extra outreach to different groups. You can use technology, again with caution. One thing I did learn while I was working on this presentation, so the Great Got Milk campaign, you remember the Got Milk? So they tried to do that in Mexico and just translate it. And what it translated out to was, are you lactating? So, wouldn't that be a fun shirt to wear? Training your staff, making certain that your staff understands how to recognize that someone might need language assistance, and then what do they do? Role playing, I say this over and over. I know every single human really hates role playing, but it is a scary thing to pick up the phone and dial a 1-800 number and get an interpreter on there if you have never done it and you don't know how this works and you don't know to make certain, okay, say a few things, let the interpreter speak. Wait for it to come back to you, right? There's a process to making certain that you've done this in a way that is easier for the interpreter for you to not speak for 10 minutes and then be like, okay, can you please say all that? Evaluate and update. So making certain that you understand what worked, what didn't work, And then make certain that you're training staff on any new changes that are coming in with that. Keeping a list of, we had this situation, it didn't work out well. The cool thing about language access is that just when you think you have thought of every single situation that could come up, something else happens and you're like, oh, I didn't think of that. So things like people may not be literate yet in their own language. So having things translated into languages where literacy just hasn't been, and education hasn't been at the top of the list of government things to make sure it happens. It's not gonna do much to have a bunch of things translated. And then you just wanna make certain that you're measuring your success. So tracking your return of investment, looking at your key metrics, welcome back. Making certain that you're hitting the marks, that that you are actually saying got milk and not are you lactating? Are your customers satisfied with that? And you should be able to see those differences in your sales because they will speak to their community members and they will buy things. You want to make certain that you're gathering that feedback from those multilingual customers to give them the best service as you continue to go forward. And then adjust your strategy. So when something doesn't work, it just doesn't work. Try something different. Again, having those types of conversations with folks from these different communities is going to be your best way to make certain that what you're wanting to sell is something that they're wanting to buy. So finally, your growth potential is unstoppable once you start expanding into different languages. Understanding how to pull that through a marketing component and the outreach strategy, you will bring in people that you would never have anticipated would be interested in your product. It makes it customer-centric. It makes them know that you are concerned about their needs, their wants out of a product, and how you can build that for them. And then finally, in your next steps, start small. You don't need to translate everything about your organization or your company or your product. Think of one language, one target audience you might like to work with. Look at getting that information translated, or if there's a need for an interpreter to come in. Focus on one, see how it goes. Try, find that something doesn't work, and then try again. It will continue to take your business wherever it is that you want to go with it, either keeping it local and to our communities here in Kansas City, or looking at a global scale with this. So with that was a lot of information that's kind of chunked into different pieces. What questions can I answer? Yes, ma'am.
How do you think small businesses should go about budgeting that? So if I start opening up my social media and working with the translator to translate some of the stuff, a highly technical job, right? And so I want to make sure that translator is skilled.
Yep.
But once I post that, I want to be able to talk to people.
Yep.
So I'll have to expect that
Yep.
I'll need a translator if I get projects where somebody's primary language is, something that I don't speak.
Yep.
What would you recommend in terms of just taking those numbers and saying if I get one project, just assuming a one-to-one, every time I meet with somebody, I'm gonna have to have a translator, or would it be I have all these documents I also have to provide to them, so I have to, pretty much any time I'm in that room, that translator would have to come back and be a part of it, whether I'm talking to the client or creating the documentation to support them.
So I would build out what you think the amount of time is that you would need to have an interpreter, right? So if you're using, most likely with an interpreter, it's gonna be the consecutive. So whatever time it takes with an English-speaking person, it's gonna take twice as long,
Oh, okay.
right? So, and typically those in-person interpreters anywhere from 50 to 75 an hour with a minimum of 2 hours. So I would
My
start,
project structure is gonna even look different than.
what's that?
I said, so my project structure will probably look different.
Right.
As well as, there was something else I should have wrote it down.
So figure out the amount of time you would spend with an English speaking customer for those in-person meetings, double it. So you're gonna know that, then you can start figuring out kind of what it would look like cost-wise for that. The translation, if you spoke with Bridging the Gap Interpreters or JVS, they're gonna try to work with you, right? They want their folks to make money.
Right. And
And
I don't wanna put all that charge back on them because they need a service.
right, yeah. So, and is your business something that other people are doing as well? Other companies?
Cybersecurity, so yeah.
Whew.
there's a lot.
Yeah, so you might even do some Googling on language access and cybersecurity companies to see what it is that they're doing or how they're doing it. And my contact information is right on those things. I'm more than happy to run through different ideas with you and see what we can come up with. But the translation, I know my sister, a real estate agent, and that's one of the things we talked about is it's a lot of documents to get translated, right? And then it's kind of like, well, we all just sign it anyway without even reading all those documents. But it's like, is that how we just say, oh, we just sign it, right? So I love that you're thinking about it in the cybersecurity space. And please feel free to just reach out to me and we can grab some coffee and start throwing things around. Yes.
Learning to speak a new language, is there a recommendation for, like, if you don't have time to take a class, or do you recommend, or does anybody in here recommend any of those?
Has anybody done some of the apps like the Duolingo or
Anybody have a favorite?
Rosetta Stone?
Okay.
I just started using bilingual, where it tells you pick what type of documents you're interested in, and then it provides you articles or news or whatever you're interested in, and it'll give you the translation of what you're wanting to learn, as well as the English version, and so you just read it, and if you get stuck, you can kind of, it's pretty cool.
Any documents you have translated, especially a contract, even if it's in English, you need better vetted by an attorney. Even if you pull something off the legal Zoom at the bottom, it says have an attorney look at it, because everything's different.
Yeah. And the other good thing about that is, especially when you're looking at legal documents, having a paid company that does your interpretation and translation is a liability saver for you, right? So it's not, I just pulled it off of Google Translate. Well, that's not at all what this says. So it's a good idea to always
It's important too, I mean, even if you've ever used AI or any of them, just in English, and you look at it, and you're like, oh, that is, it didn't translate in English what I wanted it to say, so imagine when you're trying to do it in another language.
Well, there was a large company that had AI doing their responses to customer stuff. And somebody asked about a refund policy, and they just pulled something off the internet. And so they said, well, that's not our policy.
It is now.
It is, because that's what you told them, and that's what it's going to do.
So the city of New York had their Department of Health and Social Services information translated, and it translated the Department of Health and Social Services into the Communist Party of China.
Oh my.
So thank you all so much for coming. I'll stick around here for a few minutes. I appreciate you.